Hello, I'm Doran Allen Bell-Dotan, and I am not happy to have to say what I need to say herein. I've been trying to avoid saying this, but it can't be avoided. Hashem is dismantling the entire structure that the rabbis built in Babylon. I've been telling the public for years that this would happen if the rabbis did not return to Torah, true Torah. And I knew that the rabbis would not listen to me precisely because I don't come in the package that they expected to hear Torah truth from. And I guess Hashem chose someone who was a poor, maybe a little bit strange woman from a family without a lot of rabbinical connections to teach Torah truth to, because Hashem expected those who would hear the truth to recognize it no matter what package it came from, and not give people the chance who go on appearances to be able to get away with their nonsense anymore. So I got chosen for the job despite outwardly not having the requirements of the job description. So no one listened to me when I said that the fulfillments of the prophets were going to happen now, and if the rabbis didn't return to true Torah, that Hashem would take their house apart stone by stone. Now you have no choice but to listen because you see it happening. In order to understand what's happening, we have to know what the Babylonian diaspora is. Not was, but is. YisraEl, as I've said in other videos, Bezrat Hashem, is equal to 541, which is the same thing as 1,540. And that is the value of the expression ayin yamin, which means right eye. Ayin small, written with a vav in small, it can be written with or without a vav, is equal to 1,157, which is the same thing as 158, which is nitzchi, which means eternal, and it is also Keren Yerushalayim, which would be 2,156, which means the ray of light from Yerushalayim. And it is also V'kol Eretz, which means and every land. So the right eye is YisraEl, and the left eye is and every country, every land, not country in the state in the meaning of state as we know it today, but every land. Israel then is God's right eye in creation. And every other nation is the left eye, and as we know from our physical experience, in order to have deep, comprehensive vision, both eyes have to cooperate, and there has to be a lot of overlap in the field of vision to be able to see. So that is by no means to say that the right eye or the left eye is preferable. They both have to work in tandem, in perfect cooperation, to be able to see things deeply and dimensionally. Otherwise you get a flat, partial picture. So Israel is meant to be the right eye. The conjunctiva in the eye is very, very, very thin. It's a very thin membrane, and it has a lot of blood vessels in it. The matzot of Pesach, the matzah on Pesach, which is called lachma anya, has been translated incorrectly as the bread of poverty. What it is actually being talked about is the conjunctiva of the eye, which is called lachmit ha'ayin. In order for the eyes to work correctly, they have to be fed by blood from a pure heart. Etz HaChaim, which is the tree of life, is equal to 1,603, which is the same as 604, which is dam, which is blood. The blood that comes into the conjunctiva of the eyes has to come from a pure heart. If it doesn't, then a calcification of the conjunctiva of the eye occurs, and one does not see the light dancing. It becomes fossilized, it becomes hardened, it becomes stony. So if one has a stony heart, the blood that flows out of it likewise makes the conjunctiva in the eye like stone, and people see Torah when they read it as though it is set in stone, because they are seeing through conjunctiva, which in fact are set in stone. The result of which is that the reality that they perceive likewise seems obdurate and set in stone and immutable, and they don't see the different versions dancing, and they don't have access to be able to go in and out of one to another alternative interpretation of reality. The Hebrew word for Babylon is Bavel. It is an acronym for Balev, which means in the heart. And the Hebrew word Bilbul, which is confusion, is also a doubling of lev, which is heart. So any kind of confusion of the heart is going to be doubled and redoubled. In order to fix the confusion in the heart, which sends out blood, which calcifies the conjunctiva in the eye, Lachmi ta'ayin, lachma ania. Hashem sends us down from the level of the right eye to the heart. So it's tremendous fall, because the seeing of the eyes in the head is our highest function. The eyes are actually an internal organ which are on the outside of our body. Very, very, very delicate, and the functioning is extremely high. So we fall from the level of the right eye, Israel falls from the level of the right eye to the level of the heart, where the confusion is. And we're meant therein to clear up the confusion so that the blood can flow pure into the conjunctiva, and we can see and we can return to seeing the world as Hashem intends. That was the intention for the diaspora to Babylon. But the rabbis liked Babylon. And they set up a home there and forgot that they were supposed to return to Israel. Had the rabbis said, having fallen from the level of the right eye to the level of the heart, we can no longer see as we did, but the Torah is precious to us, so we want to keep these ceremonies as placeholders, there wouldn't have been a problem so much with that. But eventually the placeholder became for them the real deal. And they no longer knew that they were just holding a place, and began to think that those were the actual mitzvot. By the way, another substitution value for YisraEl, for 541, and Ayin Yamin 1540 is ha-mitzvot, written with one vav as it should be. So we were supposed to return to doing ha-mitzvot. But they didn't return. They liked it down there in Bilbulia, in their confusion. And they instituted Prose Bowl on the pretense that they were doing people a favor by encouraging rich people to continue to give loans before the sabbatical year, by not making people have to nullify those contracts at the sabbatical year. The rabbis took it upon themselves to think that they knew better for us than Hashem, who said, no, every 7 years, loans are nullified. So now Hashem is dismantling the entire Babylonian structure. Everything that was built economically on allowing loans to go on past the sabbatical year, and also what's called heter iska, which allows the banks to take interest. Who says that they're allowed to? Rabbis made up these travesties. And then they say that they can't go back on it because rabbis greater than they instituted Prose Bulls. They can't go back on it, which is absolute nonsense, because even if it was Hillel who instituted, and I'm not entirely sure that it was, he did not say you have to do Prose Bull. It's not an institution that has to be perpetuated. So the rabbis have every right, even under their own interpretation, to do away with Prose Bull, but they refuse to, because the bull in Prose Bull is Baal, and what they actually are Kohanei Baal. They are the priests of Baal. And so Hashem is taking their house apart, rather unceremoniously. At this point, the dismantling is progressing apace, and it is being done in no uncertain terms. The kid gloves are off. And yet the rabbis persist in their nonsense. One of the things that the rabbis did, because they were no longer learning real Torah, they could not look into the Chumash, they could not look the 5 books of Moses, they could not look at the Pentateuch, I don't know what the heck you call it, and they could no longer look into the books of the prophets, which are actually part and parcel of the real oral Torah, tradition of oral Torah, and see the truth. They had made up these fancies, these fanciful laws of theirs in Babylon. They felt that something was missing. They had gotten to a place of like compulsive eaters. In fact, eating compulsively and junk food exists in the world precisely because the rabbis did what they did. They are no longer satisfied. They never get to what's called shvi'i, sova. They never get to the level of satiation from what they're learning because they're not learning real Torah. So to try to make up for the lack, they created the pseudo-mysticism, which is actually a mystification of the Talmud rather than getting closer to Torah. They went off on a trip, and one of the really bad trips that they went off on is the Sefer HaZohar, which is written in faulty Aramaic, which shows that it was not Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai who wrote it. Ben Yochai, not Bar Yochai, by the way, and there are anachronisms in that which show that it could only have been written during the Middle Ages. So this was not a book that was written during the Second Temple period. It was not written by Shimon ben Yochai, as they claim. Basically, what it is a mystification of rabbis' erroneous interpretations. And it sends them off on a trip. Those who learn what they call Sefer HaZohar are essentially trying to sneak into Hashem's house through a back alley door and rape Hashem. That which Hashem is not willing to show them directly from Torah, they are trying to extract by force. The punishment for which is very, very extreme. People who learn Sefer HaZohar invariably become sexually dysfunctional and even deviant. They also start to hallucinate badly. One cannot force Hashem to give up the secrets of the Torah, which are secrets that only the dearest of friends and intimates share, by force. And that is precisely what Sefer HaZohar is. The rabbis have become obsessive about learning HaZohar. And they themselves even say, ligros bli lahavin. Read it even if you don't understand it. And they psychically drive themselves with things that they have not been found worthy and ready by Hashem to understand they are trying to do it by force. These are people, this is where the phenomena of rape and sexual deviancy derive from. This is the source of it. When someone tries to get more Torah knowledge than they have morally worked on themselves to be able to gain, when they try to understand these things purely intellectually, that act is the progenitor act of all sexual deviancy in the world. That's where it comes from. And we see that we are dealing with sexual deviancy on a grand scale in the world. It has gotten revealed to be out in public on very, very, very high levels of government now. Hashem is getting at the root of that, which is the rabbis who had the unmitigated gall to try to twist Hashem's arm, so to speak, and force Hashem to give them secrets to which they were not privy. And that's being dismantled. This is not easy to say. This really hurts. Do not think for a minute that Christianity was any kind of an improvement on this situation. Christians say that Yeshu's father is Hashem because they don't know how the creation works. Yeshu's father is the rabbis. They are the ones who brought that phenomenon into being, with completely misunderstanding what Torah was saying and thinking that Hashem was asking for sacrifices. Not understanding what the Akedah was, not with the narrative about Avraham and Yitzchak, where they think that Hashem asked Avraham to sacrifice his son. Crazy things that the rabbis themselves didn't understand, that found their way into Christianity. I think it's fair to make the analogy of saying, as Hunter Biden is to Joe Biden, so Christianity is to the rabbinical establishment. And now the rabbis find themselves in a position where there are missionaries coming into Israel, virulent missionaries. They created a golem. And that's the Ben Soea. That's exactly what it is. The wayward son that wasn't disciplined and eventually becomes unmanageable in the house. This is exactly what's happening. And the rabbis are trying to fend off these missionaries, which have evidently been invited in because what they're doing should be illegal, but they're being allowed to set up house. And they're trying to fight the missionaries while protecting their Talmudic establishment. Well, that's not going to work. I have news for you, boys and girls. Those who think that they're helping the Ethiopians by protecting them from the missionaries, and you're going to get them to do Talmudic Judaism, what you're essentially doing is trying to put the Jews from Ethiopia, who are the descendants of Hamelech Shlomo, Malkat Shva, and Shevet Dan, who left Israel because they did not want to get into a war with their brothers. These are the purest Jews that exist. If you think that you are going to poison them with your Talmud, you are also mistaken. Because they know what that junk is for what it is too. You are not going to destroy Shlomo's house. It is your Babylonian house that is being destroyed. Thank you for listening.